one night with the Alpha King. Then she disappeared, and he began the hunt. The kingdom of Thalarian lay beneath a sky painted in endless twilight, where the sun never fully rose and the moon's silver glow bathed the land in shadow. Its forests whispered ancient secrets, and rivers shimmered like threads of liquid glass. Among the high towers and winding streets, tales of the Alpha King Kale spread like wildfire, feared by some, worshipped by others. He was a man of unmatched power, a ruler of humans and wolves alike, bound by prophecy and haunted by the shadows of his own heart. Far beyond the walls of Thalorian, in a small village cradled by misty hills, Selene lived quietly. She was known as a healer, gifted with a touch that could soothe fevered brows and aching limbs. Yet even she could not understand the stirrings within her. Dreams filled with silver wolves whispered warnings in the wind, and a strange pull toward a destiny she had never sought. Her past was a mosaic of loss. Parents gone before she could remember them. A home that had felt like a prison, and a gift that both frightened and isolated her. One evening, the village elders spoke in hurried whispers of a festival in Thalorian's capital. It was said that the Alpha King would appear, judging the bravery and loyalty of his people, while dark celebrations honored the powers that lurked unseen. For reasons she could not explain, Selene felt compelled to go. The forest path shimmered under her cautious steps, the air heavy with anticipation. Her heart thrummed with fear and curiosity. When she arrived at the capital, the city sprawled like a living thing, lit by lanterns that glimmered like captured stars. Music rose in lilting waves, carrying both celebration and warning. Nobles in rich attire danced and laughed, while masked figures moved silently through the crowd. Magic hummed in the air, subtle and sharp, brushing against Selene's skin. She felt it tug at her very being, guiding her toward the palace gates. Inside, the throne room was vast and cold, its high arches carved with images of wolves and kings long dead. At the far end, seated upon a throne of dark iron and silver, was Kale. Even at a distance, his presence struck like lightning. His eyes, sharp and luminous, scanned the room, piercing every mask, every false smile. He exuded a strength that was both terrifying and magnetic. The air seemed to shift when he moved, bending around him as if the room itself bowed to his will. Selene's breath caught. She had read of him in tales and feared his name, yet something deeper stirred, a pull she could not resist. Perhaps it was fate. Perhaps it was curiosity. Whatever it was, it drew her forward until she found herself standing before him, heart hammering, hands trembling slightly. Kale's gaze met hers, and for a moment the noise of the festival faded into silence. Time itself seemed to still, suspended between two worlds. He studied her, tilting his head as if trying to read the thoughts she did not know she had. She felt exposed yet alive, as though the king could see the very essence of her soul. "You are not from here," he said, his voice low, resonant, carrying authority that made the hairs on her arms rise.
"No," Selene whispered.
I come from the village to the north. I heal. That is all I know." Kale's lips curved in the faintest smile.
It was not warmth. It was a storm contained, a challenge, a question. A healer, yet your eyes carry more than the stories allow.
"There is fire in you! Magic, perhaps?"
Selene felt the blood rush to her face. She had always hidden her gift, afraid of discovery. Yet in his gaze, she sensed neither malice nor judgment, only an intense, undeniable awareness.
I do not know," she admitted. "That is both your curse and your gift," Kale said, standing. His presence filled the room, commanding attention and bending the air. "Come, walk with me." Against all caution, she obeyed.
They moved through the corridors, lit by lanterns swaying with shadows that seemed alive. Kale's voice was low, conversational, yet every word carried weight.
He spoke of the kingdom, of prophecy, of burdens that had twisted him into both king and predator. Selene listened, enraptured, sensing a vulnerability beneath his iron mask of power.
As they reached the palace gardens, the moon hung full and low, casting silver light across fountains and flowering trees. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of jasmine and pine. Here, the world seemed paused, a fragile bubble between danger and freedom. Cale stopped beside a fountain, his gaze never leaving hers.
"Do you understand why you are here?" he asked. "No," she admitted, "but I feel—" "Drawn! Drawn!"
he repeated, almost a whisper.
Yes, fate has a way of guiding those who cannot see it themselves. One night can change everything, and yet you may vanish before the sun rises. Tell me, healer, do you fear what you cannot control? Seleni's hands clutched the folds of her cloak. I fear it, and yet I am curious.
Cale's hand brushed a strand of hair from her face, a touch light as wind but electric in its intensity.
Curiosity is dangerous, he said. It can consume you, or it can awaken what you were always meant to be.
For a moment, words fell away. They were two souls suspended in moonlight, bound by a tension neither fully understood. And then, as if drawn by forces older than both of them, their hands met. Not in a gesture of possession, but of recognition. The air crackled, and Selene felt a surge of warmth and fear, as though the very essence of her being had been touched by something ancient and undeniable. The night stretched on, filled with stolen glances, whispered confessions, and the silent acknowledgement of a connection that neither could name. Cale spoke of the burdens of power, of the loneliness that came with being feared, of the moments he longed for something pure and untainted. Selene listened, sharing in her own quiet way. Stories of loss, of healing, of nights spent whispering to the stars and hoping someone would hear.
Yet dawn approached, relentless and cruel.
The first pale light of the hidden sun began to streak across the sky, and Selene knew instinctively that their night was ending. Fear, both for herself and for the consequences of their bond, surged within her.
I cannot stay, she whispered.
Cale's eyes darkened, a storm gathering behind their brilliance.
Then you leave me nothing,
he said, his voice heavy with desire, regret, and command.
You vanish like smoke in the wind, and I am left to hunt shadows.
Selene's heart clenched, but she stepped back. She could not explain why she fled, only that something within her whispered that survival, secrets, and destiny demanded it.
Without another word, she turned, moving through the palace corridors with the agility of someone guided by instinct and fear. Cale did not chase her at first.
He simply stood, chest heaving, fingers brushing the place where her hand had been, his gaze burning with a mixture of rage, longing, and helplessness. Then, as the last of the moonlight faded, he realized what he had lost.
On the marble floor of the garden lay a small token, a silver pendant etched with symbols neither entirely human nor entirely magical. Selene had left it, not as a farewell, but as a sign. A sign of her existence, her power, and the storm that would inevitably follow.
Cale picked it up, eyes narrowing. The weight of it in his hand was heavier than any crown, heavier than any weapon.
It was a promise, a challenge, and a mystery all at once. He knew, deep within, that the hunt had begun. Not for conquest, not for obedience, but for the woman who had seen him, not as a king, but as a man.
Outside, the kingdom slumbered, oblivious to the threads of fate being woven in silence. Wolves howled in distant forests, and shadows stretched long across the walls. Somewhere, hidden, Selene paused, her breath steadying, her heart still echoing the connection of the night. She did not know what the future held, only that she had glimpsed a fire she could neither ignore nor escape. And in that twilight kingdom, where power, magic, and destiny intertwined, a hunter's vow was whispered into the wind.
Find her! Whatever it takes, I will not let her vanish from my world again. The night ended, but the story was far from over. Somewhere between the shadows and the silver light, fate was stirring, preparing to pull Selene and Kale back into each other's orbit and into a destiny that neither fully understood, yet neither could resist. The kingdom of Thalorian had a rhythm that only the shadows could understand. Even as the sun, or what little light dared to rise, cast a pale glow across the city, the streets remained hushed, as if the entire world sensed the storm that had begun. King Kale paced the throne room, the silver pendant clenched tightly in his hand. His chest rose and fell with a tension that had no relief, and the usual iron calm that marked him as the Alpha King had cracked. He was a predator by nature, yet for the first time he hunted something not born of flesh and bone alone. He hunted Selene, the healer who had stolen more than his attention in a single night. She had captured his heart, his curiosity, and the fragile hope he had long buried beneath duty and power. The Council of Advisors awaited his command, but Kale's voice did not carry authority tonight. It carried obsession. "She has vanished," he said finally, words like steel wrapped in fire. "And I will find her." "Your Majesty," an advisor began, hesitant. "The forests are vast. The border villages are scattered. Perhaps. Kale's eyes, glowing faintly in the twilight, cut through the room. "Perhaps you do not understand. She is not lost by chance. Someone is hiding her, or destiny is testing me. Either way, I will not wait." He left the throne room without another word, moving through the corridors with the silent confidence of a wolf among prey. His knights attempted to follow, but Kale did not need company. He moved alone, sensing the threads of fate that connected him to Selene, drawing him forward with invisible force. Meanwhile, far from the city, Selene moved through the forests that bordered her village. Her steps were light, but every sound, the crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves, made her heart leap. She had left Thalorian not just to escape, but to understand. The night with Kale had awakened something within her, a power she had never fully trusted. She could feel it now, like fire beneath her skin, a pulse that reacted to her emotions, to the world around her. She paused beside a stream, the water glowing faintly under the silver light. Her reflection shimmered, distorted by ripples, and she saw not just her face but the uncertainty that had always lived there. Her hands trembled slightly, and when she placed them upon the water, the surface stilled. The ripple froze, then split into patterns of light, almost as if the water itself recognized her. "You are not safe," a voice whispered through the wind. Selene turned sharply. The forest seemed empty, yet the voice carried a weight that made her pulse quicken. "I am careful," she murmured to herself. Yet even as she spoke, she felt the truth in the words. She was being watched. Someone or something was aware of her, aware of the power she had barely begun to understand. Back in Thalorian, Kale's search took him to the northern forests, lands twisted by magic and shadow. Wolves followed him silently, their eyes glowing like embers, and the trees themselves seemed to part as he passed. Kale did not speak, did not ask for directions. He did not need them. His senses, sharpened by centuries of survival and leadership, guided him. He felt her, like a heartbeat out of sync with the world, like a thread in a tapestry that only he could see. As night fell again, Selene stumbled upon an abandoned tower, its stone walls crumbling and covered with ivy. She felt drawn there, as if some force within the ruins called her. Inside, dust swirled in beams of moonlight, and the air hummed faintly with energy. She followed instinct, her fingers brushing over carved runes that glowed faintly at her touch. A memory rose unbidden, a story her parents had whispered when she was a child, of a healer who could command elements, whose gift could mend not only flesh but destiny itself. The stories had seemed like fairy tales then, but now, standing in that tower, Selene felt the truth of them. The magic inside her had awakened. She tried to steady herself. Focus, she thought. "Do not panic! You can control this!" The pendant Kale had left behind began to hum softly in her pocket, warm against her skin. It was a connection, subtle but undeniable. She realized with a start that Kale was closer than she thought. Not physically, he was still leagues away, but in some inexplicable, magical way, their fates were intertwined.
Far in the northern woods, Kale paused, sensing the pendant's resonance. His jaw tightened. He had expected resistance, escape, maybe even hiding, but the bond this token created was undeniable. He lowered his hand toward it, his mind sharpening with focus. He would follow this thread, no matter the dangers, no matter the distance. The hunt was not merely physical, it was a test of will. Thalorian's forests were treacherous, full of hidden cliffs, cursed wildlife, and remnants of old magic that could twist the unwary mind. Kale moved through it all with precision. Yet the closer he got to Celine, the more he realized that the journey demanded more than strength. He would need patience, cunning, and a willingness to let her come to him on her own terms. Celine, meanwhile, was learning her limits. She practiced shaping small elements, summoning gusts of wind to clear debris, coaxing water to rise and shimmer, feeling the pulse of life in the plants and animals around her. Her confidence grew, but so did her awareness that Kale's pursuit was relentless. She glimpsed him through shadows at the edge of vision, or perhaps she imagined it. Every night the pendant hummed, tugging her attention like a lighthouse in a storm. The first confrontation came unexpectedly. A pack of wild wolves, larger and more fearsome than any ordinary creatures, blocked her path along a narrow ridge. Their eyes burned amber, and their growls echoed like distant thunder. Celine's heart froze, but she did not flee. Instead, she raised her hands, summoning the pulse of energy within her. The wolves paused, their growls softening, as if recognizing a power equal to their own. And then, Kale appeared, stepping silently from the shadows, his presence commanding and electric. The wolves bowed their heads slightly, acknowledging him. "You are learning faster than I expected," he said, his voice low, carrying warmth beneath its usual steel. "Control, Selena. Fear is natural, but it cannot dominate you." She met his gaze, a mixture of relief and defiance in her eyes. "I am not yours to command," she said softly. Kale's expression softened, though the fire in his eyes remained. "No," he admitted. "You are not. But understand this. I will protect you, even when you resist. That is the oath I make as Alpha. You are tied to me, whether you know it or not." The words hung between them, a blend of warning and promise. Celine's pulse quickened, but she did not step closer. She needed to understand herself first, her power, her past, and the reason destiny had drawn her to this man who was both king and predator. Over the following days, their paths continued to intertwine. Kale's hunt took him deeper into treacherous lands, caves that whispered forgotten spells, forests where shadows moved independently, and rivers that flowed with memories of ancient battles. Each step brought him closer to Selene, and each encounter tested his restraint. He wanted to claim her, to protect her, yet he knew that trust and respect were as essential as strength. Selene, too, was changing. Her understanding of her abilities grew, as did her comprehension of the danger surrounding her. She began leaving subtle signs, marks in the soil, patterns in the wind, guiding Kale without surrendering completely. Their connection became a silent conversation, threaded through magic, intuition, and stolen glances. But the world was not idle. Whispers of Celine's abilities reached the ears of rivals, forces that would use her gift to undermine Kale's kingdom. Bandits, sorcerers, and creatures of shadow lurked in the forests. Kale confronted them with calculated ferocity, but every encounter reminded him of what he feared most: losing her to fate, to magic, or to the enemies that thrived in darkness. One night, as Selene rested in the ruins of an old monastery, she felt a presence unlike any before. It was a cold, calculating force, watching, waiting. Her breath caught. This was no ordinary threat. It was a sentinel of ancient power, drawn to the same thread that bound her and Kale together. Kale arrived moments later, moving like a shadow among ruins. The tension between them was palpable. Not anger, but the unspoken acknowledgement that the next challenge could break or bind them. He did not reach for her immediately, giving her space, but his presence was enough to steady her, to remind her that she was not alone. You cannot face this alone, he said softly, almost a whisper carried on the wind.
But neither can I face it for you. We are partners in this, whether we wish it or not. Celine's gaze met his.
The storm of emotion inside her, fear, longing, determination, was mirrored in his own eyes. They were two souls learning to navigate the same perilous path, drawn together by destiny yet tested by their own hesitations and pride. And then, as the wind carried the howl of distant wolves and the moon bathed the ruins in silver light, they both knew that the real hunt was only beginning. Whoever, or whatever, was tracking Celine would not wait. And Kale's pursuit would demand more than speed, more than strength. It would demand trust, courage, and a willingness to confront the darkness within themselves as much as the threats outside. The moon hung low over the northern forests, silver light spilling like liquid over twisted branches and silent undergrowth. The air was thick with magic, older than the kingdom itself, whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. Celine moved carefully through the ruins of an ancient temple, her senses heightened, every footstep measured. The pendant Kale had left behind hummed softly against her chest, a reminder that her journey was no longer hers alone. She had learned much since that first night. Her gift, once unpredictable and hidden, now flowed with a strength she had only begun to understand. She could bend water to her will, coax flames to flicker without fuel, and sense the heartbeat of life around her. Yet with every discovery came doubt.
How much power was safe? How much could she trust herself? And Kale!
For all her progress, the forest was no friend. Shadows moved unnaturally, whispering promises and threats in a language older than human memory. Celine paused, listening. The forest had eyes, and she could feel them on her. She raised her hands instinctively, letting a pulse of energy radiate outward. Leaves trembled, water rippled in nearby streams, and the faint glow of her aura revealed that the shadows were not merely watching, they were testing her. Kale approached silently, his movements fluid and predatory, yet careful. He did not startle her. He never had. It was a strange comfort to see him after days of isolation, a reminder that her life and purpose were tied to more than the survival of the moment. "You are stronger than I imagined," Kale said, his voice low, carrying both admiration and warning.
But strength alone is not enough. You must learn to control what desires to control you.
Celine met his gaze, her own eyes reflecting both fire and uncertainty.
I'm trying, she whispered.
I don't want to hurt anyone, especially you. Kale stepped closer, the distance between them charged with energy, and yet he did not touch her. You will not, he assured her. But the world will test you. And I cannot protect you from everything.
The words were heavier than any weapon. Celine felt the weight of his honesty pressing against her chest.
She wanted to say something, anything, but no words seemed adequate. Instead, she nodded, trusting that he understood more than she could say.
Their journey through the forest continued, each night bringing new challenges. Bandits and rogue sorcerers sought to capture or harm Celine, drawn to her growing power. Kale intercepted them with ease, his strength and skill undeniable, but even he could not predict every danger. One evening they were ambushed near the cliffs of Mornwatch. A group of shadowy figures emerged, cloaked in dark magic that twisted their forms. Celine's heart pounded. She raised her hands, summoning a shield of energy, but her concentration faltered under the weight of fear and adrenaline. Kale moved beside her, instinctively protective, his presence anchoring her. Together they fought, not as king and healer, but as partners. Fire and shadow collided, light bending against darkness, until the attackers fled into the night, leaving behind only silence and the scent of smoke. In the aftermath, Celine sank to her knees, trembling. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand over hers, not in command, but in solidarity. You are learning, he said quietly. Every mistake teaches you more than victory ever could. Celine looked at him, feeling the pull of something deeper than fear or survival. And you?
she asked softly. Do you ever make mistakes? Kale's gaze darkened. Many, he admitted. Some I cannot undo. Some I carry like wounds beneath the skin. And yet, you make me want to try. Her breath caught. The moment was fleeting, fragile, a spark of something unspoken between them. For the first time, Celine sensed that Kale was not merely the Alpha King. He was a man capable of vulnerability, of longing, of desire restrained by duty and destiny. The following nights tested them further. The deeper they traveled, the more Celine's powers responded to the environment. Water from streams would rise at her command, flames flickered without fuel, and the trees themselves seemed to bend slightly in recognition of her presence. Yet with each display of her abilities, Celine felt a growing sense of responsibility and fear. Power could heal, but it could also destroy. And enemies were not limited to rogue humans. Whispers of ancient magic suggested that creatures older than Thalorian itself watched her every move. Kale observed her carefully, noting both the growing confidence and the tremors of uncertainty. He could not shield her from destiny itself, but he could guide her, teach her, and ensure that she survived the trials ahead. At night, as they made camp beneath towering oaks, he would speak of strategy, history, and the lessons of his long reign. Celine listened, absorbing not just the words but the weight behind them. She began to understand that power was never simply taken, it was earned through restraint, knowledge, and courage. Yet the nights also brought quiet moments of tension, of longing. They would sit near campfires, exchanging glances heavier than words, their conversation often wandering to personal truths, fears, and the lives they had left behind. One night, Celine asked about the pendant he had left her. "Why did you leave it?" she asked, tracing its silver surface with her fingers. Kale's eyes softened, but the hardness in his jaw remained. "Because I could not take you by force. You had to leave, to survive, and to discover what you are. But it is also a tether proof that even distance cannot sever the bond between us. That I will find you, no matter where you hide." Selina's chest tightened. The thought of being hunted, or of being found, was both thrilling and terrifying. She was drawn to him, yet every step closer risked exposure to forces beyond their control. Days later, they reached the Vale of Echoes, a canyon where magic was known to twist reality. The air shimmered with unseen energy, and whispers seemed to echo from the cliffs themselves. Celine's senses flared. This was a place of power, one that could amplify her abilities or overwhelm them. Kale stood beside her, watching intently. "Focus," he said. "Listen, but do not be consumed. The forest, the rocks, even the air, they are alive here. You must command your own presence before it commands you." Celine inhaled deeply, letting her pulse align with the rhythm of the canyon. She raised her hands and for the first time felt her energy merge with the environment. A small wind lifted leaves into spiraling patterns. Water in nearby pools shimmered and even the stones seemed to hum. She realized then that she was no longer merely reacting to magic. She was a part of it. Kale's eyes widened slightly, pride tempered with caution. "Good," he said. "You are ready for what comes next. But know this. The forces that watch you do not pause. Every step we take draws attention. You must be prepared." Their quiet moment was shattered by a sudden shadow that moved faster than either could anticipate. From the cliffs, a figure leapt, dark and twisting, cloaked in energy that pulsed like heartbeat. Celine gasped, instinctively raising a shield of shimmering light. Kale moved, protective and precise, intercepting the attack with a fluid motion that spoke of centuries of battle. The shadow hissed and recoiled, revealing a face partially masked, eyes glowing with a dangerous intelligence. "You should not have come here," it said, voice like ice. "The girl belongs to the prophecy. She will either destroy or save the kingdom. And you will only bring ruin if you interfere." Kale's jaw tightened. "We will see," he said calmly, yet every muscle in his body was ready to strike. He glanced at Selene.
Do you understand what must be done? Selene nodded, feeling both fear and clarity. Yes.
Together, she said, her voice steady. The shadow launched again, faster and more dangerous, but Selene responded. Energy flowed from her like a river unleashed, forming barriers, guiding flames, bending air. Kale fought beside her, each movement perfectly synchronized, each strike protective and precise. The battle was not merely physical. It was a test of will, power, and trust. When the shadow finally fled, retreating into the canyon, Selene sank to her knees, exhausted yet exhilarated. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand over hers once more.
You are ready, he said. But readiness alone will not guarantee survival. Danger will come again, stronger, sharper, and more relentless. And the prophecy, it is far from complete. Selene looked up at him, seeing not only the Alpha King, but the man behind the crown.
I trust you,
she said softly. Kale's eyes softened, the tension in his features easing for a brief moment.
And I trust you,
he admitted. The words were rare, precious, and carried the weight of unspoken longing, of unacknowledged emotion. Yet even as they shared that fragile connection, the wind carried a whisper of warning, an echo from the shadows that Selene and Kale could not ignore. The forces that watched, that waited, had marked them both.
The hunt, the prophecy, and their entwined fates were only beginning. The night deepened, casting long shadows across the Vale of Echoes.
Selene and Kale remained close, side by side, hearts racing not only from battle but from the unspoken tension that drew them together. The moon above seemed to pulse in time with their bond, silver light reflecting both danger and desire. And in that moment neither could deny the truth. The real test was yet to come. Not just the threats in the forest, not just the ancient magic, but the challenge of trusting each other, surrendering to fate, and facing the darkness that had waited for centuries to claim them. The Vale of Echoes lay silent beneath a heavy sky, the moon's silver light reflecting off jagged rocks and shimmering pools. The forest had grown darker, denser, alive with magic older than any mortal memory.
Every rustle, every whisper carried a warning. Destiny was near. And danger moved in ways that were both subtle and relentless.
Selene stood on a cliff's edge, the wind tugging at her cloak and hair. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from anticipation. She could feel it. The final trial. The culmination of all the lessons, fears, and powers she had discovered. The pendant Kale had left behind glowed softly against her chest, a tether of hope and connection, reminding her that she was not alone. Behind her, Kale emerged from the shadows, silent and commanding, yet softer than ever. His eyes, usually sharp and untouchable, were now reflective pools of concern, pride, and desire. He had followed her through forests, cliffs, and ruins, and every step had been a lesson in patience, restraint, and trust. "You are ready," he said quietly, moving closer.
The forces you face, they will test everything. Your power, your courage, even us. You must trust yourself, Selene.
She nodded, her gaze steady. And you. Can you face them without me? Kale smiled faintly, though the hardness in his jaw remained.
I am stronger with you, he admitted. And I will not fail you. Not now, not ever.
The air shifted suddenly, and a cold presence slithered through the veil. Shadows moved unnaturally, twisting and coiling like living serpents. The very rocks seemed to hum with power, resonating with Selene's own energy. Then the figure emerged, a cloaked being, taller than any human, eyes glowing like molten silver. This was the one who had haunted their journey, the force tied to the prophecy, the sentinel of a fate neither Selene nor Kale could escape. You should not have come, the figure said, voice sharp as ice. The prophecy cannot be broken. The girl's power will either save or destroy the kingdom. And your interference, Alpha King, will only hasten ruin. Kale stepped forward, the silver pendant clutched in his hand, energy coiling around him like a living shield.
We will see whose destiny is stronger, he said. Not yours to command, and not yours to threaten. Selene took a deep breath, feeling the flow of power within her. She had come far. She had learned, grown, and embraced the magic that had once terrified her. She raised her hands, and the air responded. Wind swirled, water in nearby streams lifted, and the stones themselves seemed to pulse in recognition of her command. The sentinel lunged, a swirl of shadow and magic, but Selene was ready.
She met it with a surge of energy, a combination of control and instinct, fire and water, light and wind. Kale fought beside her, fluid and precise, a protective shadow that amplified her strength rather than overshadowing it.
Their bond, the trust, the connection, the unspoken understanding, was now a weapon as potent as any spell or steel. The battle raged across the Vale. Shadow and light collided in explosions of energy that lit the cliffs like lightning, echoing through the canyon with thunderous force. Selene's control wavered, and Kale's voice cut through the chaos. Focus! Breathe! You are not alone. Selene took a shuddering breath, centering herself. She drew energy not from anger or fear, but from her connection to the forest, to the moonlight, to Kale. A pulse of light erupted from her hands, pushing the shadows back, illuminating the Vale with brilliance. The sentinel staggered, retreating slightly. And Kale pressed the advantage. He moved with purpose, striking not to harm but to weaken, creating openings for Selene to direct her power. Together they became a single force, two souls intertwined, fighting not just for survival but for each other. In a final surge, Selene channeled everything she had learned. The air shimmered, the earth trembled, and a wave of energy surged forward, engulfing the sentinel. Its form twisted and dissipated, leaving only a whisper of wind and the faint hum of magic fading into silence. For a moment the Vale was still. The only sounds were their breathing, the rustle of leaves, and the soft glow of the pendant. Selene sank to her knees, exhausted, but triumphant. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand over hers. You did it, he said softly. You controlled it. You survived. And you are more than the prophecy ever promised. Selene looked up at him, seeing not only the Alpha King, but the man beneath the crown, the man who had guided her, protected her, and believed in her even when she doubted herself. We did it, she whispered. Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. Yes, together. The wind shifted, gentle now, carrying a sense of peace and release. The veil of echoes had tested them, but it had also revealed something greater than power or prophecy. It had revealed trust, courage, and the strength of their bond. Days later, as they returned to Thalorian, the kingdom seemed changed. Not the land itself, but the way they saw it. The forests were still alive with magic, the river still shimmered, but danger had diminished, leaving space for hope, growth, and healing. Kale walked beside Selene, no longer merely an Alpha King, but a man capable of love and vulnerability. Selene moved with confidence, her powers fully embraced, her fears tempered by experience and trust. In the throne room, Kale addressed his council, the pendant resting against his chest. The kingdom is safe, he said. And it will remain so, not through fear, but through strength, wisdom, and unity. But some things, some truths, must remain between those who fought and survived together. Selene stood beside him, a quiet presence that radiated calm and strength. The council saw the bond between them, unspoken, undeniable, and profound. They had faced destiny, conquered shadow, and emerged transformed. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Kale and Selene stood beneath the silver moonlight. The wind carried the scent of jasmine and pine, the same air that had witnessed their first night together. Selene reached for Kale's hand and he took it, not as a king claiming power, but as a man seeking connection. You changed me, Kale said, voice low, almost reverent. Not through force, not through obedience, but simply by existing, by being who you are. Selene smiled softly. And you changed me, she replied. You showed me that strength is not just power. It is trust, patience, and courage. Their hands intertwined, and for the first time they allowed themselves to simply be, to feel, to exist without fear of destiny or prophecy.
The forest whispered around them. The moonlight draped silver over their forms, and the kingdom lay peaceful below. Yet even in that serenity, a faint hum lingered in the air. A reminder that magic never truly sleeps, that destiny continues to weave its threads, and that Celine and Kale's story, though victorious, was only one chapter in the greater saga of Thalorian. They stood together, side by side, facing a horizon bathed in twilight and possibility. No longer hunter and hunted, king and subject, or shadow and flame. They were equals, partners, bound by experience, trust, and the fire of what they had endured together. And as the first light of dawn, soft, pale, almost hesitant, kissed the kingdom, Celine whispered, "Whatever comes next, we will face it together." Kale tightened his grip on her hand, a silent promise. Together, he agreed. And in that single word, spoken under the silver sky of Thalorian, all fear, doubt, and prophecy fell away, leaving only hope, trust, and the bond of two souls who had found each other amidst darkness.
The kingdom was quiet but alive.
The night had ended, yet the story remained, etched into the land, whispered in the forests, and carried in the hearts of those who dared to believe in courage, magic, and love that could withstand any shadow.